Welcome, everyone, to Elevate with V. I'm so excited to be here with you. This podcast was inspired by my own healing journey. I aspire to share amazing, inspiring souls to help us each elevate on our journey so we can keep aligning with our soul's calling and gifts. I can't wait to introduce my guest today, Jenny. Jenny is a contemporary fine artist based out of Chicago. She is highly influenced by beauty in complex human emotions and the human condition, and attempts to reveal them through multiple nuances and expressions through her art. Her interest in human frailty shows in her paintings, where she creates semi-abstracts of human silhouettes and fluctuating forms in half-light, all drawn from reality, personal experiences, and memories. Your artwork, Jenny, is so moving, mesmerizing, and inspiring, and I'm so excited to learn more about your journey today. So welcome, Jenny.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for having me, and thank you for the love.
Absolutely. So, this show is all about highlighting healing journeys and how we have each navigated, sometimes through multiple storms, to get to our silver linings. And I know that you also have had at least one pivotal moment that had you step into your personal healing journey. And I would love to hear more about that. So, do share, please.
I feel like that was just kind of throughout life, we go through experiences, and I think they are, I am looking, I always say they are signposts in life to lead you to where you're supposed to go. And grief and pain, especially, are those moments. And when you take the time to really be in that space to heal and learn and understand the patterns that got you to that place, I think is where you find a lot of answers. And for me, one of the greatest answers for the quest I was on, which is what I was meant to do in life, came during a dark period about 10 years ago. And during that period in pain, I couldn't stop thinking about painting. And it was just, it was really interesting because I had never painted before. And so to feel that that was my calling was so, like, it felt very alien to me at the time. But I'm so glad I did it, because I always tell people, if you're really looking for answers of what to do in life, it hurts when you're not doing it. And so that was the pain. That was my like main indication, because I would look at artists. I've always enjoyed looking at paintings, and Art Institute is literally one of my favorite places to hang out at for hours and hours in the galleries. Um, but I just never really thought about teaching myself or painting. And when I ended up in that space, it was such a gift, because it just hurts so much to look at all these artists creating such stunning work, especially on Instagram, which was really my gateway into this space. And it was just wonderful to be able to just kind of listen to that and breathe through it and understand that there's something deep here. There's something really meaningful in this pain that I'm experiencing that I'm supposed to explore a little bit further.
Wow. So I'm going to probably dig a little bit
Yeah.
deeper. I know what you shared. So um, you went through some sort of very painful situation. And
Mhm.
do you feel that, are you a believer that the universe kind of navigates us through certain things, where certain things happen where the universe is like, I kind of gave you some red flags and you weren't quite listening. So I'm just going to have to, unfortunately, just roll over you now and have you pick up all the pieces. Was that kind of your experience?
Yes, I think that when you set an intention of seeking your purpose, when you have that melancholy, that quest, that ache, that I'm meant to do something, and when that answer comes knocking at your door and you ignore it, um, I think the universe doesn't intervene. When your intention, which is what I talked about yesterday, a little clip released on my Instagram from one of my latest interviews, and I said, when you set an intention, be ready. If your intention is strong enough, the universe is going to take you on that path if you're willing to actually embark upon it. And for me, that intervention came in a very dark way. But thank God for that, because I truly, truly don't think I would have taken this road. Although I don't know, I probably would have. But again, I think another like catastrophe would have needed to happen for me to really, really see that this is what I was meant to do. So yeah, I do believe that the universe intervenes. when you're meant to do something, I think the universe comes knocking at your door. It gets louder and louder each time.
So, I know for me, and I know everyone's journey is so different. And I know personally, I felt like I was living out my dream with what I was doing. I had a small food business in Chicago, which was doing amazing. And I was like, oh my God, we're going to just expand. We're going to go nationwide. We're getting ready to onboard onto Amazon. And literally within a span of like a month, everything fell apart.
Oh, I'm
Every
so sorry.
single thing that I could imagine like fell apart. The business partnership fell apart. That resulted in me having to shut down the business, go through all of that trauma and that pain. And that kind of kicked me into what people call the dark night of the soul journey, right? So I guess I'm curious as to, how you said that when you set the attention with the universe, was that before anything happened or was it post your experience?
No. It had already started before I met. So my dark period was I was engaged to my ex-fiance at the time. We were in the midst of planning our wedding. We were a week away from signing the contract for the wedding, for the venue, and everything fell apart overnight for me because I had no idea that he had doubts. And but before all of that happened, I had already quit the corporate world. I had quit 2 jobs. I had gotten fired from a job, my only job that I got fired from, because I was so unhappy and miserable professionally. It just did no longer felt right to serve anybody else's dream. And I knew it was time to build my own dream. I just did not know what that dream was yet. And so no, I think that I was already getting ready before the universe. I think you just, there's that, like, before the tsunami, it's coming, like there are signs. I knew the signs were there. Like there was a lot of chaos within me. And now I know how to manage it. Now I welcome the chaos, right? Because I feel like, okay, when transitions are coming, you just know, you breathe through it. And I have an outlet for it now, because in the past I did not. I'm not a journal writer. I should be, because there's a little bit of a writer in me, but my paintings are my journals essentially. And finding that outlet, finding that means to express myself so deeply, I think was truly missing. And so, yes, I was on that quest. And when it arrived, I am so glad I heed that calling, because it was just, yeah, I don't know. Like, I truly believe it's a divine intervention when something like this shows up at your door. And so when you are willing to welcome that in your world, I think it's like, oh, the healing is exponential.
I couldn't agree more. And I think part of it, at least for me, was, when everything falls apart, you have to go through the whole process, right? You have to go through all
Yeah.
the emotions, all the anger, all the hurt, the pain, the betrayal, you name it. You can throw in so many adjectives, right?
Yeah.
And just having to go through all of that. But like you said, it took me personally probably 7 to 8 months of doing really deep dive. And this was all during the pandemic. So I had all the time in the world to focus on
Yeah.
my healing journey. And so it's really interesting what you're sharing, because it took me a certain amount of time to even get to a space where I could kind of
Yeah.
understand, wow, there were so many red flags. And, and it was not the first time that this pattern had showed into my life, right? It had come before.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
this
Yeah.
time the universe was like, okay, we've given you a couple of signs, but you don't seem to be getting it. So now we're just going to have to give you the big old enchilada. So I really appreciate what you were sharing, because that's really deep, and I know that there are probably a lot of other people who've had a similar experience to you, and just having to navigate that. And it's really interesting, something that you shared about, you always felt very drawn to like art and being inspired by it, but you're like, suddenly whenever that happened for you, like, oh, that's what you need to do, and you had never even drawn before.
I could
Oh,
always
you could
draw.
draw.
Yeah,
Okay.
yes, I could draw. So I could, yeah, I drew characters, cartoon characters all the time for my nieces and nephews. So I knew I could draw. So it wasn't something that I just decided one day, like, hey, I'm going to teach myself how to draw. So I did
Right.
have at least that somewhat of a little bit of that hill I had started climbing since I was born. So thank God for that, because I, when I wanted to draw when I was a kid, I would doodle a lot, and I was allowed to, in my family, I was welcome. It was welcomed for me to be able to just draw whatever I wanted. So that was one of my outlets growing up.
I love it. That's actually really wonderful because I was going to ask you about that. I like to sometimes jump around a little bit in terms of like how it was like growing up,
Yeah.
and especially since you were artistic, and I know I was that way as well. It's not always welcome, and it's kind of sometimes a cultural thing. And so I'm really excited to hear that, your family was very open to your artistic abilities
Well,
and
not as a career. I'm not gonna lie. That was a tough thing to sell to them. So I always tell people, when you know it's your dream, don't share it with people until dream quietly, share loudly, right? When you're executing loudly, so execute loudly, dream quietly. That's the first time I've actually said that, so I'm gonna coin that. um,
I love that.
but but I do think that keep your dreams close to you, keep them safe, because what happens with dreams, especially large, big dreams, is people who love you come from a place of care and concern. Unfortunately, they also project their fears onto you. And so that's the tough pill to digest, because while you're already trying to conquer your fears, now you have somebody else's fears piling on top of that. And it's really hard to isolate your fears with the world's fears. And so I'm of the belief that keep your dreams tight, close to you, to your chest. Have a very small group of people that truly get the big aspirations and the big dreams. There are friends who are just your hangout friends who really help you escape from the chaos of your world, your mind, the rest of the world. However, there are some friends and some, like the tribe, the professional tribe that you have, who get it, who get how to dream big, who get the story of execution, who get how a project goes from start to finish, because essentially your life is a project, right? Multiple different projects. And so for me, that was the big thing, to be able to keep that quiet, and just really dive into it on my own until I was ready to share with the world, was really important.
I love that. So,
And
you know,
that's a practice of mine to this day. I don't share some of my big dreams with most people.
that makes sense. Listen, each one of us has our own process. We've learned through our own
Yeah.
process, right? So,
Yeah.
um, and it's almost like what you were sharing, like, I was very artistic, but my mom was very artistic. So it was easy for me to like explore that as a young
Right.
person. But there's a difference, right, between seeing it as a hobby or as a pastime versus, so I guess my question is, since you were already dabbling in drawing and you really enjoyed it, did you ever feel even as a kid that, oh, I would love to do this as a career, or was it just not even a thought?
I did think about it when I was a kid. I think one of the areas that I wanted to dive into, never painting, not gonna lie, never ever painting, until I was older. But I did think about architecture, or something a little more analytical, because I do love, have an massively analytical side to me, which is where my business sense, I tap into that a lot, but that's where my business sense comes from. And so I did study graphic design as a background, my education. But as soon as I graduated, I also knew that it was just such a controlled design environment to be a graphic designer, especially when I graduated. Now it's so much more creative, and I dove into e-commerce because I wanted to learn how to build businesses, online businesses, from the ground up. And my company at the time, my position actually was for a graphic designer for an e-commerce business, because there's so much creativity that's involved in an online business. Creative thinking is super necessary with front end development, design development. And so for me, going into that space was an intentional process, because I did get to tap into a little bit of the design side of things. But for the most part, it was more business driven, because I could not do a double major in my college for anything. I couldn't even do a minor in graphic design with graphic design. That was my main major, and that's it, which I think is so unfortunate. But yeah, to fast forward today, I do think that graphic design still plays a huge role in everything that I do, because I formally design all my concepts digitally first before I go to work. And we'll see where I end up with AI. I'm thinking about it. We'll see. I really, I mean, the more I look into AI and helping, trying to understand these platforms, I have a little more admiration for, very hesitant admiration for AI artists, because there's a lot of work that goes into actually creating an image and teaching the computer what you want, because there's so much massaging that happens on the back end. And now I'm starting to understand that. But as an artist, I'm just like, by the time I tell the computer, teach the computer, I can just do it. So I kind of just exit.
Oh my gosh, that's so funny. I've literally just had a conversation with someone yesterday. I'm like, oh, I keep hearing all these different things, but I think it's okay to explore. So I think I'm gonna just be exploring it a little bit. But this is so fascinating, Jenny. I didn't realize we have so much in common because I have a degree in graphic design as well. So I went to
Nice.
UIC here in Chicago,
Same.
and it was really funny. I'm still a little bit bitter about them not giving me a minor in photography and art history. I was short of 1 credit. So I was like, come on, for 1 credit, give it to me. So, anyways, but what's interesting is I spent a few years in India when my dad was there, and it was 11th and 12th grade in New Delhi. And
Okay.
I was like, okay, what am I going to take? And it was, I don't know. I'm presuming you grew up
Yeah.
here, Jenny. Did you grow
Mhm.
up here? Yeah.
No, I
And
grew up in India.
oh, you did.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
And so 11th to 12th grade, I was in New Delhi and I was like, what am I going to do? So I kind of went into the science group, right? Because it was very structured, very differently, like how it is structured here, right? And I remember taking architectural drawing as one of my classes. So when I actually came to Chicago, I thought I was going to get into the School of Architecture. And then when I went and met with, my dad and like the, what do you call them? The people that you meet with to like
Yeah,
kind of
yeah.
share. Yeah. And so they're like, yeah, that would be great. That was a great fit, but it's going to be at least 5 years. Most people don't finish architecture. It takes at least 5 to 5.5 years. And my dad's like, what? I'm only going to be here for about 3 years. I don't think this is a good idea. What else is there? And so that's kind of how I kind of found graphic design as like my next thing to do, and that it ended up becoming my major. So that's so interesting that you also have that as your background. Now I'm really curious because
Yes.
that is a very unusual major, as you know, for folks like us who are, from this, specific backgrounds that we have, be it Indian, Pakistani. So I'm really curious how you managed to do that. Were your parents like excited for you, or were they like, oh, I don't know if this is a good idea?
No, I already they were fine with. Graphic design is a little more business driven, and so that they were on board with that. They would have loved if it was. I was never into engineering. That was never going to be my career. But medicine, I probably would have fared well in medicine had I gone down that route. So that's something they would have loved. But yeah, they my parents deep down always knew I had a creative side, to me, that I wanted to explore, and graphic design seemed like a practical place to start for me. So yeah, that wasn't too much of a battle for me to tell them what to do there and how to show up for me. And UIC has actually a decent graphic design program, so it wasn't, the decision wasn't hard for me to make.
I love that. Well, that's exciting to hear. I just know that in my experience, I had just come to Chicago and I literally like started like within a month of getting here, I joined UIC. So it
Yeah,
was
yeah.
completely, so many things were so different, such a big school. I remember my first day, I got so lost. It took me like 20 extra minutes to find where the art school was. So it's just very, very funny to me. But um, I know for me, one of the things that was very different and challenging was I was the only Indian person who was in art school that I'd ever seen. And so whenever I would share with someone, I could sense from them that they're like, that's interesting, art school. I wonder what she's going to do with that. So it was just a very fascinating experience
Yeah.
kind of navigating that. I don't know what your experience was, or were you just kind of in your own bubble? You're like, hey, I'm doing this, it doesn't matter.
I don't think anybody, I would, like you said, I was the only Indian in the program, and none of my friends understood what I did for a living, or I mean, what knew what I wanted to do for a living. Although I didn't know what I wanted to do for a living at the time, but they also didn't understand my projects, and it was just like, I mean, they would just watch in awe or surprise, or just, I'm sure they were wondering what I was going to do with those skills in life. But no, I don't think anybody got what the program entailed.
Oh my goodness, I totally experienced that as well. So, once you came out and you were done with your degree, where did you go next? Did you actually look for a design job or?
Like I said, it was the e-commerce job that they were looking for, a graphic designer. So I was brought in as an e-commerce assistant to build this online business.
Amazing. And I feel like I caught a little excerpt of that interview that you posted on your Instagram. And
Yeah.
so I think you mentioned that one of the jobs you also worked was Oprah's e-commerce store when she started that, right?
Yes. So that was, I think, about 5 or 7 years into my career. I was looking for I had been working in the B2B space, and I wanted to jump into B2C, and ideally in clothing and fashion, because I still feel like that's another small bit of calling that I have, that I feel like I'm supposed to do something with clothing at some point in time in life. So just wanted that experience of inventory sales and online business, of building a retail store. And Oprah, the company was opening an Oprah store to kind of as an extension of the show and her lifestyle products. And my boss, who was amazing, her name's Darcy Rogers. She had experience in helming a couple of Ralph Lauren stores, including the flagship store here in Chicago. And so she was brought on board to open the physical store, the brick and mortar here, the Oprah store. We had a 5,000 square foot store. And I was brought on to launch that online. So I headed that for about 4 years.
Wow, that's kind of a fun experience.
Oh, it was wonderful, right? Like, it was just small company, big company, blended into one, because my department was just me and an assistant, and then I outsourced everything. And then I had another manager who worked with me as well at a point. But then our full department was also dispersed in all their special areas, which was really wonderful. The direct team, the main team, was my boss and the merchandise manager, director of merchandise, and then I was heading e-commerce. So we were the three who kind of led the area, the departments, essentially. So it felt like almost like a startup, yet the company had 1,200 people. So it was just, yeah, it was a very interesting dynamic.
Wow, that's fascinating. So, where did that take you? Because I know one of the things you mentioned was you were in a job and you're like, okay, this is it. I just don't want to do this anymore. Was that the next thing you stepped into, or?
No, so the next thing I stepped into was in e-commerce subscription business. The company had just won Techstars here in Chicago in 2012, I believe. They won Techstars, and they brought me. I was their first hire after they got their first seed round funding, and then so I just wanted to learn how to like raise money and build a business from the ground up. And I stayed there for a year. The company moved to Boston, so we were commuting for about 6 months, which was a nightmare. I don't know how people do commute life. Um, but and then that was a job I got fired from because it just wasn't working for both parties. And of course, that 6 and 7 years later, when I was painting a mural in the same city, that boss and I reconnected at a heart to heart for about 4 hours. And it was wonderful because we both knew we were wrong for each other at the time. Um, as far as the company goes, the philosophy, what we wanted to do in life, I didn't know I was supposed to paint. So 2 years later, I started painting. So that just tells you where life was leading. So that was my first kind of like crash and burn moment. And coming out from that space and really facing the fact that I was fired, because a lot of people don't like to say that. But saying that I got fired really helped me own the responsibility of the role I played in that. You don't just get fired because it's their fault. You get fired because it's, you play a role in it too. And so I had to own that I was truly unhappy as an employee, and it was not fair to the team. So for me to move on from that really started this like self-exploration process that I had to start understanding I was unhappy professionally. And I took another job because it was just sort of a lateral move, landed in my lap literally that day. And I was like, sure. I was so lazy to look for a job, and stayed there for about 8 months. Same story, super unhappy. And then I decided to go the consulting route. And so I left that company and started my own consulting agency. Just it was just me and a couple of assistants that I had hired. I did social media marketing while I just chose to see what else I was supposed to do, because that was just a means to making a paycheck. And I have really great network of people of now, like a community that I have built in Chicago. And so getting clients wasn't hard. But that also didn't feel right. A year later, I decided to kind of shut that down. And I did that a little bit with clients. I just parted ways with my final client in that space, because it was time. But yeah, that kept me afloat for the last 10 years. I believe in multiple streams of income. And it just kind of kept my right brain active and left brain active at the same time with art and, business side of things. And then I found art. Here I am.
I love that. And then you found art. So let's talk about that a little bit. I know you said that you were really feeling this draw to like paint, of course, pun intended, draw to paint. So, when did you just decide that, okay, this is what I'm going to do? And then how did you kind of jump in?
Um, it was never that simple. Like it seems in hindsight, as always, so simple, like steps 1, 2, 3. Um, but getting to those 1, 2, 3 steps is like so many subsets of, steps that I took. Just understanding pain was the first thing. And yes, there's this whole myth perpetuating the world, the space, the industry everywhere, that you need grief and pain to create art. That is so untrue. And to romanticize that myth and that notion is really detrimental to an artist, like the fabric of everything that we are as artists. I could not think about painting while I was grieving. I started thinking about painting while I was starting to heal. And I needed an outlet to capture that journey and my story of what I really was fascinated by during that process, and all of the moments that I've learned, is when we are going through grief, we really have no way of capturing that moment. We talk about the silver lining, right? Like that silver lining is so beautiful. And we talk about going through that, getting to that space and illuminating that growth. However, growth is so incredibly painful. And the shedding of the skin and the layers, all of it, I wanted to capture that process, that whole darker journey, and really giving it a stage and space that we don't talk about. That's that vulnerability. Vulnerability is incredibly painful because you are really setting yourself, in the end, vulnerability is about setting yourself up for rejection and being ready for it. And I think we are so terrified of rejection, right? Like there have been actually like scientific studies done on, social studies done on this. And for me, I wanted to capture all of those learnings in the darker space and highlight that and illuminate that in a very beautiful way. And that we need to process these stories that we would not share with the world otherwise, just sharing it with a therapist. And most people don't even see a therapist, right? So I think like for me, I just wanted to, and it really started with me. I just wanted to capture that for myself. And the minute I started doing that, there was an audience, there was a tribe that's just kind of jumped right in. And it was so incredibly beautiful because it ignited something in me and in the audience that joined this journey with me. And I feel like everybody who comes to my show now, I'd say about 90% aren't really collectors because they may not want to purchase, but they also may not be able to afford. But those are the people who come and talk about the stories and their healing and how my art has extended them that space. And for me, that is the greatest gift out of all of this. I mean, that was such a byproduct that I never expected. Making money and healing others was never part of my plan. My plan was really just to document my pain and really my learnings. and everything else just kind of like took off. So to this date, making money is never the number one thing when I create a piece. A piece is always about the story I want to tell. And if it connects with one person, it makes my day, it makes my year.
Oh, that's so beautiful, Jenny. Very powerful what you're sharing. And, you know, I guess to me, like I've been following you on Instagram for a little bit, and just every time I see a piece of artwork, I just get sucked in. Like there's no other word to like describe it, right? Because there's something about it where I think you play with this element of dark and light, and it's just something that like almost kind of forces you to pause to be like, you know, for me, one of the beautiful things with art is, you know, you can have your own interpretation, but it's always nice to kind of get kind of almost like a insight into what the artist is thinking or feeling, and then to be able to kind of also see that perspective. So I think it's so powerful. And I guess I kind of want to bring it back to like the beginning when you started, where you just kind of like pulling out paints and starting to draw and just allowing things to come, or did you have some sort of flow in the beginning when you were starting to
I mean,
create?
I knew that I wanted to paint some deeper, very deeper, meaningful, emotionally meaningful pieces that told stories and not just a singular. Um, I wanted these stories to unfold in myriad of ways, right? Like I did not want them to be very like they all. I wanted them to be metaphors for like these fables, these stories that I've come up with in my life, I've read, whatever, whoever inspires me. And so there was that philosophical element, huge philosophical element tied to it. I always think like I'm an existentialist. And for me, finding that peace and that really capturing that sadness and that melancholy in the world for myself, I wanted something to be that platform to really open up the space for that. So that's where I started. I knew that, and then creating just abstract work did not, like I wasn't, something in me in it was missing. So figurative work kind of, I knew that figurative work was always going to be a part of it. And then beyond that, I also knew that I did not, while I think realism is stunning, I just knew that I couldn't connect with it personally to create work that looked like exactly like a photograph. For me, it was like I might as well go into photography and create art through photography, which is clearly like it's not an easy, feat to conquer. Like creating incredible photography is a lot of work, and that's a whole other art form. And so for me, creating art that had this semi-realism kind of really, I drew in that. I like those paintings drew me closer the most. And I've studied so many artists over the course of time. The inspiration comes from so many different places. Like Rothko's abstract work is stunning to me because we really have no idea as an artist how to create those layers. Or Da Vinci's work, and of course his like letters. I've read his letters, and so there's this like whole philosophical tie-in behind the thinking behind an artist. And then Goya's paintings or Klimt, or I just have really always been drawn to figurative work. But however, I wanted to take it to the modern space, modern art space. So finding my own style and my own technique, that definitely took a lot of work. So it wasn't, but the reason I mention all of these steps is because that's how the story started. And it's really hard to explain to new artists where to start. I think you really need to know what your story is. Everyone has a story to tell, and we need to know what your story is. And the art comes from that story. Because if you can't, we're all storytellers, and find a unique way of telling your story. And for me, that was important. That I wanted these like emotions that just kind of make you ache in that moment when you look at it, for the people who connect with it. And it wasn't something that everyone was going to connect with it. It was very clear. So it was not for everybody. It was for a very specific set of audience. And so, yeah, that's really where I started. And then teaching myself was a whole another step, like a
Wow.
whole another 6 months to 8 months to just even start understanding how to even create the kind of work I wanted to create. I cried a lot. I still cry a lot.
Hey, it's part of the emotion, right? And I think to
Yeah.
me that's so connected to what you said about the vulnerability, right? Because I think it's when we're in those spaces where you might want to hide the most is kind of where the gems are hidden, right? Because once you look in
Yeah,
those spaces, there's that's kind of where a lot of the beauty lies, right? In terms of what you're
yeah,
going to like look to create. And so I really appreciate that because it's very true. Like, there is something about your pieces. It's not going to be for everyone, but for those people that really kind of appreciate it, I mean, we're definitely like we're like, okay, what's she creating? I want to see what project she's up to and, what she's looking to build. So when did you kind of go into kind of like the mural style? Because that's like a whole other level, right? Was that like a year from when you started or later or?
I mean, everything for me was like increments of a year. It was so fast the way my career moved in art. Um, First year I was learning. Second year I created a 100-day project for myself, and I had my show at the end of that project. And then a year later I'm painting murals, right? And it was just like every year. The reason that happened is because I never said no to any opportunity. It scared the hell out of me, and I always said yes. I mean, anything. And I'm working on something really special right now that I want to execute, and it scares the hell out of me. And that's really when I know I'm on the right path in a good way, right? Like the fear. I'm not talking about red flags. I'm talking about all the green flags that scare the hell out of you. And so for me, that muraling journey started with my first mural, which was a temporary 1 month mural at Violet Hour. And Violet Hour has that facade in the front that is painted by different artists. Every month, they invite artists to submit almost like a proposal. And then if you are picked, you get a stipend to paint it. And and they're booked out for like a year in advance. And the only way you know it's Violet Hour is with that facade. They don't really have a sign, right? Like it's a true speakeasy in Chicago. And their artists for that month when I painted the mural fell through. And so someone who was working for that company, that hospitality group, he saw that opening and he messaged me. His name is Justin. He's a good friend of mine. And he said, "You really need to submit this. I'm a big fan." And I was like, "I do not paint murals." Like, I'm a very private painter in my studio. It's a very sacred practice. He said, "You need to do this." And I kept pushing it back. And then 2 weeks later, I submitted a proposal and I got it. And I remember when I was getting ready to paint it next day, I had no idea how I was going to do it. I was so nervous. And my friend Caesar, who's an incredible muralist, I called him and I started crying. And he's like, "I will help you tomorrow. I will show up." So to this date, I will call him and I'm like, "Okay, I have to execute this." And he'll still help me. Like the latest piece that I painted, he helped me figure out how to create the skylines, right? Like, and so that's the big thing. You can't do this alone. You just can't. You better have a tribe. I have a great group of friends that are willing to help each other out. If I get approached for commissions that I don't want to paint, or they're not in my category of work that I accept, I will always share artists that I know who are willing, who do that kind of work. And they've gotten so many artists that I know have gotten work because of that from me. And I'm always happy to share that love. And so that's literally, it was all about networking and sharing love, how I got started in my mural journey.
Wow. Yeah, it's just like the universe is like, okay, here's an opportunity. Are you going to accept? You're like, oh, I don't know. I'm scared. I
Yeah.
don't know if I want to do this. But I'm thinking that once you did it, it gave you that sort of like, oh, wait, I think this is actually really cool. I think I can do this.
Yeah. And then Federales invited us to paint those wings permanent, because my first mural was a set of wings. And it was interactive and people were taking pictures against it, right? I'm like, "Oh, this is so fun." And so when Federales invited me to paint it, Caesar and I accepted that commission. And that's still like the highest Instagram wings in Chicago. It's a destination spot right now. And so you just never know how the journey takes you, right? And personally, for me, murals are a way of extracting the artist from the work, because it becomes about the viewer who takes pictures against it. So I really, really love that. I actually love it when they don't tag me either, because if they don't notice me, I'm more than happy, because it's about the art. It's about them enjoying the moment there.
Oh, that's so beautiful. And I love what you shared because, one of the things, and I'm sure you've experienced this, is when you go through some of your darkest moments in your life. And sometimes you're surprised because you think that there are going to be certain people who are going to be by your side. And then you realize that, oh, okay, maybe that's not the case. And then you have unexpected people who show up and you're
Hmm.
like, what? Oh my goodness. So I know for me, that was a big part of my journey
Yeah.
is once you come out on the other side to a certain degree, there was I almost had to grieve the loss of so many people that I thought were kind of more in my corner or with me. And then realizing later that it's almost like that's part of the process. You have to release so they can step into this like newer, different
Yeah.
version of yourself. And so
I
having that
think, yeah.
time,
Yeah. And I'm so sorry you went through that. And I do believe that, yeah, the romantic loss is
yeah,
one thing. I
yeah,
think we almost, sad to say this out loud, but we almost like expect that because we walk into romance with the possibility of it not working out. Yes, the pain is just as deep, but we are in some way walking in with that expectation. But when it comes to business partnerships or friendships, you really aren't walking in with an exit plan. You are walking in for, and those losses are massive. Those losses are so painful. That betrayal, I don't think there's anything like that. And so, and I've had to say goodbye this year for a couple of, um, relationships this year that were not romantic. And that was tough. It was really, really, I feel like this was as life altering as it was to go through the breakup with my ex fiance. And that came to me as a shock. Yes, the healing is a lot shorter because now I know how to heal. I know how to self care. I
yes,
know how to channel the grief and not hide from it.
yes.
But yeah, that loss is massive.
Very much so, absolutely. And I think that's why, like, when we step into these places now where we feel so aligned in our
Mm-hmm.
soul, right, with what we're doing, it's literally like you said, it's like your tribe comes around you. You know who those people are.
Yeah,
And I think the biggest thing that I learned through this process is this human need to like attach to things. And what
yeah.
I've learned is not attaching or not attaching as strongly as I might have been before, right? And it's all a process. Like I wouldn't have been able to get there without going through everything that I did. And I'm sure that that's the case for you as well. So I'm really curious. I have to ask you this is at what point in this sort of like new kind of exploration of becoming an artist and all the things, when did you actually like kind of share with your parents, hey, this is what I'm now doing officially and come to a
I
show
mean,
or
that did
come.
not, as you can imagine, that the conversation did not go down well. They just did not think I was going to make good money from it. And that was always their fear. When I quit the corporate world, they were terrified. They just didn't know how I was going to have a 401k, right? Like that was the big thing for them. It just, honestly, just helping them understand that this is what I'm meant to do, inviting them to my show, my first show, and them seeing the how many lives I was touching. I think for my dad, that was the like eye-opening moment that okay, there's something really incredible going on here. She's meant to do this. And for me, I'll never forget. I will literally never forget that day, that night, because to hear my dad say, I had no idea this is the kind of work you do. Because he didn't know that there was such a huge philosophical tie into my work. And so for him, he's a philosopher and he's my greatest inspiration. And so for him to walk in and see that, I think that gave him some peace to say, okay, there is something really important happening here, and I need to give her that space. Of course, the fears don't go away. They are your parents, but they have seen my success and they have seen my struggles. They have also seen that I'm willing to not hide from my struggles. I lived with them for the last 7, 8 years while I built my art business, and I moved out a couple of years ago. But for them, they know that I'm not going to make rash decisions while I pursue this. This is something I'm meant to do. And they know this because at 10 years later, if I'm still, there's no doubt in my mind that this is it. I think they have accepted that she's going to be an artist now. Her mom still tells me like you should just look for a job. I look at her, I'm like, are you serious? You really think I'm ever going to get a job?
Oh my gosh. Well, thank you so much. And, I'll be honest, this was another key reason why I was very excited to have you on the show because,
Yeah,
it is important. Like one of the things I've noticed, like, first of all, I don't know a lot of other Indian people who are here who do podcasts and talk about the things that I talk about. And
yeah.
so I wanted to get that perspective because I'm like, you know what? I don't have enough people who are kind of trailblazing in their own way, right? Like you're
Oh, you'll
definitely
be
one of
so
those
surprised, by
people.
the way. I have so many Indian aunties come up to me now who have gotten to know my work, and they will come and tell me they are so proud
That's
that I'm
amazing.
doing this because I'm representing the community as a whole. And so many, like, I have made friends who are aunties who are in their 60s, and I have one who's so incredibly gifted in art, and she wants to start painting again. And she's like a kindred soul. We will grab a drink every few months and we will have these very beautifully incredible conversations, because being an artist is a melancholy, lonely journey. And to be able to find that connection with someone, um, I can't even tell you what that feels like when you have a kindred soul in their 60s tell you, did my sound stop?
No, it's here. I hear you.
Okay, good, good, good. To For that kindred soul to tell you that, hey, the melancholy doesn't go away ever. You're gonna be okay though. Because that was one of my questions. Like, does this melancholy ever go away? She said no, and it was so like peaceful to hear that I wasn't crazy. you know? Because to be successful and still feel that melancholy at all times, and now I welcome the melancholy, because and my dad always says that. My dad literally always talks about the melancholy, and I get it because he's a writer. And it's not that we romanticize that melancholy, but there's this ache, there's this sadness, there's this ache to do something in the world at all times and being slightly unsatisfied with what you're doing, which is what keeps you going, right? And so, yeah.
Oh, that's so beautiful. No, and I think, what's really important too is um in what you're sharing is, number one, for me, there was this sort of like, wow, here's another Desi who's like so like kind of left field from like most of the things that I get to see, right? And I love art. And so there was this big draw, and I think what's really important is every single person has gone through many, many different
Right.
experiences, many challenges, right? But it's sort of like when you navigate and you come out on the other side and you birth something new
Yeah.
out of that, it's really incredible, right? Because it's only then that you can go back and say, yep, I get it. There were all these crazy, painful things that happened, but without it, I would not be sitting here. Like, my podcast came out of my
Yeah.
own healing journey. And I had a very similar thing. Every time I would share with people, they're like, oh, well, what are you going to do for a job? What do you mean podcast? Oh, okay. So it's all kind of how you were saying, right? Like even sharing with people, you knew that even though they're coming from a good place and they mean to be supportive, but the
Yeah.
way that it gets expressed is probably not the most supportive, right? And so I had to kind of work through that of
Yeah.
this is something that I feel really aligned with. I feel like the universe is saying, yes, do it. But I also had to work through, wow, I'm going to be seen. I'm going to be like, people going to be like, who is this woman? Like 2 years later from her healing journey, like, what is she talking about? What are these
Yeah.
topics? People are talking about like their healing journeys. And I was like, yeah, because it's important. And so I feel like each one of us has our own way of doing that, right? Like through your art, I mean, truly talk about like healing, right? I mean, sometimes there are not even words to describe because it's literally emotions that are being processed looking at something. No words are even needed, right? So I think it's so
Oh,
incredible. At least to me, that's how art
yeah, yeah,
feels
yeah,
to
yeah, yeah.
me.
Yeah.
And so, now, of course, I'm doing it with words, but I'm looking for people to really kind of share
Yeah.
their insights because there's so many other people, and especially in our culture, like, let's be honest, there are a lot of things that people don't talk about because it's not
Yeah.
okay. And
Yeah.
it's better to just show that everything's okay, even though everything could be crumbling and falling apart.
Always.
You're just not allowed to talk about it. So I think for me, there's always been this drive to like, we have to start to normalize some of these conversations because all of us are going through things, and to not feel like you can talk or express them is just it's just it hurts me, it pains my heart, right? But
Hmm.
it's something that I feel like is so important, which is why I think I want to have people share their stories, because people will be like, oh, wait, she's just like me. She's been through all of these things too. And what an inspiration. Like, this is how she's chosen to channel her craft, her creativity,
Yeah,
her purpose, and all of us have that. So it's about inspiring people, regardless of all the different things that we go through, is keep following that nudge that says this is what you're supposed to do. And yes, there's going to be things that come up, but just keep going. And kind of what you said in the beginning, like sometimes you don't have to share everything with everybody.
yeah,
Keep some things close to your heart, because there are things that you need to work on, and when you're ready, you just get to share them.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, I say, yeah, I'm a big believer, like I said, in protecting your big dreams and aspirations. And once you have something concrete in place, you can start sharing with the world. I am doing a little bit deeper dive into leadership programs and understanding how the top leaders have built their lives around their personal steps and personal growth steps and philosophies. And one of the things that I'm learning is about accountability friends. And so that's something I'm curious about, where you actually have a different set of friends who are responsible for making you accountable as well. And I think because when you have someone to answer to, I think I think you do execute a little bit better. And so I am looking to build that tribe out next, which I'm really excited about. Which I can say that I've already started doing some of it. So
I love it. Well, I know you definitely have quite a network that you've built over your years being here. So I know that's really important to have people. And like you
yeah,
said, sometimes it's different groups of people for different things. I find that as well. But I think it's so important to have that. Like you said, we can't do this alone. And I
yeah,
think it's important for us to realize that we're kind of in a space and time, at least this is what I personally believe, where it's about supporting each other and co-creating together and doing things together. That's sort of like kind of just doing everything by yourself. You can only get so far, right? So I think
yeah,
it's really about like co-creating, and like you said, that you were sharing opportunities with other people. You're like, hey, this is not what I like to do, but I know other people. And
yeah.
so, really helping other people and supporting other people from a genuine space, I think that that's like incredibly important as well. So I really appreciate that you're doing that as well. And just
Thank
everything that
you.
you're up to. I have to say that one of the things I can't remember, you'd posted a little while ago, and I was like, oh my God, look at Jenny with all her different things that she loves to do. It was called The Intersection of Food, Art, and Wine in Chicago.
Yeah, I mean, and I one of my small dreams is to do a TV show. So it was like really nice to be able to when I got picked to do that as the Chicago guide for that episode. It was so lovely. And I did something small for Blick the other day. So that comes out in December. So I'm tapping into that space next, which I'm really curious about. Because I don't think I'm only meant to paint. Paint is beautiful, but I do have multiple areas of expression that I want. I've always been that artist, and so I'm looking forward to seeing what else I can do out there. And that was a lot of fun. That got a lot of great feedback, and so we'll see where that takes me.
Well, it looked beautiful. I did get a chance to watch the show, and I was like, oh, what is this? Look at this, the sommeliers and all of this. Oh my God, the food is like art, right? Art
I
is
mean,
food.
food
And
is
then,
like
yeah.
so much. Yeah, I'm a big foodie, so it just made sense that they invited me to do that. So that was not
I
a
love
surprise.
that. I
Yeah.
love that. And yeah, and I've been in hospitality for quite a few years. I was a concierge for many years,
Oh,
so
nice.
it's very much something that I feel very drawn to as well, just being in that industry and being able to enjoy all the beautiful just food and spaces and art and
Yeah.
all of those things. So, well, this has been so much fun to connect with you, Jenny. Thank you so much for taking the time to share your journey, what you're up to, and just so everyone knows that's tuning in, all of Jenny's information will be in the bio section. So please definitely look her up. Her work is just absolutely gorgeous. And of course, stay tuned because she's going to be obviously working on lots of different things that she's going to share in the upcoming future. So we will all get to be surprised in that process. So as we wrap up, Jenny, is there anything that you'd like to share with the audience? A lot of people that tune in are going through some of their kind of more challenging, tougher times. They're navigating to some of these things. Is there anything you would like to share with them as inspiration or anything that feels good to you to share right now?
Honestly, the tough times, I know it's cliche to say this, but the tough times do roll by. Just hang in there. And you will come to a day when you will look back and be grateful for this moment, because the growth that comes from pain, it's unparalleled. There's nothing like it. Of course, if it's clinical depression, of course, get medical help. But if you're just, this is a stop on the train of your life, then yeah, I'd say keep that suitcase packed and keep going, because the heart is resilient, and you have no idea what's waiting on the other side. Like, don't despair. I promise you, like, the most incredible things come at the end of, like, growth from pain.
I agree. I agree, Jenny. Beautifully said. And, we know everybody out there is, on their own journey, and just know that there's so much inspiration, so many resources, so many different things that are
Yeah.
available. And I hope that today you're getting a chance to like see inspiration in a different form. And I'm a true believer that art heals. So I hope that each one of you will check out Jenny's bio information, check out her beautiful artwork. And I just want to thank my beautiful audience for tuning in and for all of their love and support. And I can't wait to catch each of you on the next episode.
Real quick, I wanted to thank you for such wonderful questions and what you're doing with your space. I think it's such an important thing that you're doing, bringing these stories to life and sharing the moments of inspiration with people. So thank you for that. And I commend you for your journey as well, and embarking upon something so off the beaten path in our community.
Thank you so much, Jenny. I really appreciate that. Thank you.